This is Deanne Miller speaking in the third podcast in a series dealing with the 2008 Southern Baptist Convention plan to end child abuse in clergy pulpits. In this final segment, I will be talking about the ignorance behind the resistance to mandatory reporting. Start with an excerpt from The Lion King, The Paw Patrol by Lisa Ann Marsolis. "Simba," asked Pumbaa, "do you like being the Lion King? I mean, isn't it an awful lot of responsibility?" "Well, sure," answered his friend, "but I like having everyone depend on me to keep them safe. It makes me feel as if I'm doing something that matters." Some of the greatest resistance to Chapman's speech, I fear, will come from those who still question the concept of mandatory reporting, especially when it comes to ministers who would prefer to expand their scope and practice of the profession to include roles that are considered police work, social work, or therapy. Like Reverend Charles P. McGaffey, a retired Navy chaplain, now a Baptist pastor in North Carolina, who wrote in 2008 in Christian Ethics Today, "The confessional between pastor and penitent should remain sacred and absolutely confidential," he said, "for the greater good of redemption." He made it very clear in the article that he especially felt this needs to be extended to cases of child abuse and domestic violence. The, quote, privileged communication is a topic that is as applicable to those of us who have worked in psychiatric nursing as it is for ministers. It's a topic of much debate, especially in Catholic circles, even as the coffers of one diocese after another have been seriously depleted because of the tendency to use this privilege to protect abusive priests, especially as applied to the sacrament of confession. Yet it was actually settled in Catholic circles way back in 1890. According to Patrick Wall, a former Benedictine monk and now attorney and author who left the priesthood after studying the collusion problem in the church. In 1890, the Pope said that abuse by clergy was worse than murder and must not be kept under the cloak of privileged communication. He even gave thorough instructions on how to handle the cases. Yet the mandate from Rome was conveniently and systematically ignored for over a century. Interesting how the issue really isn't debated much these days. Not anymore, after the courts made it quite clear with decisions that drained the pocketbooks of dioceses across the country. In fact, things began to get updated in policies rather quickly, some places. For instance, in the Des Moines Diocese, the Code of Ethics says that confidentiality is limited when there is clear and imminent danger to the client or to others. In such cases, personnel must contact the necessary authorities or other professionals. Considering abusers past and present without adequate intervention are often deemed by experts to be a danger to others, and considering that even experts, knowing how difficult it can be to accurately assess whether there is clear and imminent danger, tend to decide on the side of caution, this mandate covers the question of clergy reporting with a wide blanket. Even if there are no laws, reporting to civil authorities, according to Sarah Reith, a pastoral psychotherapist and Episcopalian priest in Charlotte, North Carolina, Reporting is most certainly mandated by moral law to protect the vulnerable and stop the harm, she says. To take it one step further, I personally believe that every adult Christian should understand that reporting is a vital part of being a mature disciple. With wives of male ministers fully alert to this responsibility, since we are often the first to hear a victim's story. When I shared these personal opinions with my friend Sarah, she agreed. Clergy have a golden opportunity in these cases, as she sees it. For, in her words, this profession is the most likely of any in our culture to see the functioning of the whole family. Dale Durrell, a Quaker chaplain who has faced issues of childhood abuse personally, has had a wide variety of professional experience as both a pastor and chaplain in working with troubled families. Durrell is concerned that many ministers see success as keeping a person safe for a brief period of immediate crisis, failing to see the broader picture. He explains, there is a sense of having had a part of one's soul stolen. Years later, depression, often rooted in abuse that was never adequately addressed, can result in actual death from suicide, he continues. Diane McGee, director of Phoenix House in Council Bluffs, Iowa, agrees as she speaks of the frustration she experiences due to the commonality of, quote, "nobody died today" statements. So, what about the hypothetical case, often presented to justify not reporting? One that several inexperienced self-appointed assessors in the profession have tried to convince me that they have seen many of. I'm speaking of the chance that someone might come in and offer a, quote, truly genuine confession. Are those who consider the confession to be a sacrament able to claim that such a profession is privileged communication? Reith insists that they cannot. Expounding, she says, I believe that in a proper sacrament of confession, should a child abuser confess, the priest must use it as an opportunity to make a report, even calling the police to come to the church and to stand with the person confessing while he or she takes the next step toward legal accountability. To get another perspective, I turn to Presbyterian attorney Craig Dressmeyer. You would think confessing would go hand in hand with holding yourself accountable to legal authorities in addition to religious authorities, he says. Continuing, if he is going to confess to something, he better be talking to his lawyer, Dressmeyer continues. Even attorneys are obligated to report an act if the commission of the same has not occurred, but we are under the belief that it will occur. The problem may be in the ability and the inexperience of the minister to understand the likelihood of being conned. I think it often is. According to Gary Schoner, one of the most highly experienced therapists and writers in the field of professional sexual abuse, most who present themselves as confessors turn out to do so for self-protection, believing that they are about to be caught. Years ago, Schoner made a confession to me, as he wrote of how he himself had been bamboozled on several occasions by men who were highly skilled manipulators. For those who want to see the problems of abusers as primarily spiritual ones, that can be treated best by ministers, Joe Troll and James Carter would disagree. Just as they also would agree with the need to limit confidentiality. Seeing the need for ministers to network widely in the larger community in order to identify resource people ahead of crises, they say, not every need the minister faces is a spiritual need. They write this in the book Ministerial Ethics, Being a Good Minister in a Not-So-Good World. Troll, a retired Baptist ethics professor himself, has been one of the most vocal among Baptists about the issues involving abusive clergy. Of course, for every person involved in resolving a case of abuse, one must take into account the huge spiritual component, something that many secular counselors today do very well themselves. Yet only the faith healer decides to single-handedly treat cancer. An offender, just like a cancer victim, may come in believing and hoping that this is the case, that they will receive the faith healer treatment. An enlightened pastor never buys into this, however. This is not a just get the perpetrator saved moment. It's not even a time to offer a quick forgiveness. It's a time to say that recovery will be a long journey out of despair, a time for a new beginning that certainly can be accompanied by appropriate prayer or even a salvation experience. Yet no spiritual counselor allows a person who is a perpetrator to walk away without intervention from others immediately, whether the report comes from the offender himself or through another person. A report must be made. Confessions often come in the cycle of abuse. Confession that I place in quotes. Abusers offer these many times to their victims over and over again. Only later do victims, along with others who want to believe the best, wake up if they survive to realize that the confession served as a drug or a temporary fix until the stress has returned and the promises flew out the window. So in conclusion, we report. No question. We report to civil authorities. We do not keep things within the system of the church. We report in spite of our fears and doubts, in spite of any desires to maintain control, in spite of a desire to protect others from facing consequences, to protect ourselves, or to protect the church from having to go through the deep valleys that may ensue, valleys that ultimately offer hope of transformation if we are committed to the process. We report because we have the courage, the faith that overcomes fears, or acts in spite of them. We report because we cannot live with ourselves if we do not. Because we have the knowledge and the conviction that this is the only ethical thing to do, no matter what the personal cost, nor how much others may be upset. We report, knowing that reporting, too, can itself sometimes bring about less than helpful outcomes for the victim. Reporting involves relinquishing personal control over outcomes, and this is scary in itself. Nobody knows this more than I do after spending years working with systems as a community mental health nurse, and once even having a child die before the courts decided to act on the cries of advocacy, because of what I had seen and heard repeatedly from neighbors. It can be very frustrating to muster the energy to make a report, only to find a less than receptive person assigned to intake on the morning of the call, or to discover that the case is not able to yet be declared as, quote, founded, for reasons that you may not fully understand. It's so easy to get discouraged, to throw up your hands and declare, what's the use? Instead, whenever possible, concerned citizens need to provide added watch care with unfounded cases, those declared unfounded, knowing that abusers often become more skilled than ever at manipulating and isolating their victims after a report goes unfounded. Repeated calls to make reports as more information unfolds may be necessary, sometimes over a period of several years. No matter how thankless the job, however, it is the responsibility that we must all take seriously. By reporting, we refuse to be either private investigators or therapists. We refuse to keep the secrets, no matter what the repercussions from church politics, for it is the only stance we can take if we intend to keep our integrity as Christians. For safety's sake and as a tough love gesture that is necessary in order to give opportunity for others to have the steady and consistent feedback for the slow process needed to bring about real change. Every individual in every church has the opportunity to be among the positive exceptions, even as the denomination formulates its next strategies. Certainly, Baptists can be more alert and better prepared. Ultimately, however, decisions and outcomes for each church will depend upon a level of consistency and courage that is very difficult to achieve when there is such a wide variation in the members' qualifications to make complex decisions, membership being the sole qualification for being able to vote in a Baptist church. Expecting that autonomous congregations be responsible is simply unrealistic, when members are often too close to perpetrators to be any more objective than members of incestuous families, no matter what training is offered. While it's never simple and never easy, this one is going to be harder than anyone dares imagine. Krista Brown is right. Until there is a safe place to which the victims themselves can report abuse with some reasonable expectation of being objectively heard, everything else will be window dressing. I'm Deanne Miller, www.takecourage.org, and I will be happy to hear from any of you.